We took a bit of a hiatus for me to go to Mexico for a little bit, but we are back with Troy Franklin, his tale of the tape. We're going to be breaking down his player profile from start to finish, everything from his college career, how he projects into the NFL. We're still hoping to get another 5 to 10 of these done before the NFL draft, and we got a fun one on the docket today. So if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe, check out the Tale of the Tape playlist for Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas Jr., number of other wide receivers that I've broken down so far. Now let's get into it. All right, Troy Franklin. This is his tale of the tape. Wide receiver of the University of Oregon, standing 6'2", 176 pounds. He was born on February 6, 2003, 21.2 years old on draft night, precisely 2 years younger than some of the other wide receivers in this class, Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, and some of the older guys. So very young prospect so far, only 3 years in college, an early declare, 4-star recruit coming out of high school in 2021 from Atherton, California. He did sign with the University of Oregon, but he had like 50 offers from all the major schools. Had a respectable role in 2021 as a true freshman, posting, a couple plays here and there, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty bog standard for a freshman receiver. In 2022, built upon that very, very well, increasing every statistical category, having 83 targets, 61 receptions, 891 yards, and 9 touchdowns as a 19-year-old. When Bo Nix came in from Auburn, he basically stabilized that offense, gives them a little bit more of a passing attack, and Troy Franklin commanded a 21% target share as a true sophomore. So pretty impressive sophomore year. I talked about him in summer scouting as a guy that needed to get better yet again, which is exactly what happened. In 2023, he completed a prospect profile, which I consider to be one of the more green flag prospect profiles you can have, which is come in as a high school recruit, see some playing time right away as a true freshman. In your second year, hit the breakout age metric, have a good 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, whatever. You had 900 yards, 9 touchdowns. And then in your junior season and your early declare season, you come out and you produce and absolutely blow up, put it all together and explode for a huge season. 30.4% target share in 2023 with Oregon, 1,383 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns, and 87.3 PFF receiving grade, which ranked top 15 in the country, top 10 in the Power 5, also posted a 3.32 yards per route run. So Troy Franklin, if you guys know anything about him at this point in time, he is an analytics darling. All the numbers guys love Troy Franklin because on paper, he checks pretty much every box that you could look for. Power 5 school, very productive, got better every year, good athlete, all that good stuff. Very, very production-based is why people like Troy Franklin. The tape, though, does have more warts, and I will get into that as we get through the traits, but the numbers really love Troy Franklin. He has probably a top 3 to 4 prospect profile in this entire class, even better than the likes of, Romo Dunze, Brian Thomas Jr., some of these other guys that everybody is very excited about. On paper, strictly, he actually projects as better potentially than those guys. So getting into his expected draft position, where he's expected to go in the NFL draft, right now, his expected draft position right now is 38th overall. So we're talking about a guy that's probably an early second round pick, especially after the NFL Combine. He might have gotten better, in terms of his overall draft stock and stuck into the first round. But to me, I feel like what he did at the Combine, the gauntlet drill, running a suboptimal, 40-yard dash. Some people thought he could have broke the 4.2s and stuff like that. Troy Franklin apparently had the flu at the Combine, so I don't want to hold it against him too much, but I do think the NFL draft community, the media, and the NFL teams probably knocked their grades down a little bit on him, or at least raise their eyebrows a little bit on Troy Franklin. So to me, I think he's a solid bog standard early second round wide receiver. That's still going to play in the NFL. That's still going to be a productive fantasy asset. We know that there's not a huge difference between a guy that say goes 30th overall in the NFL draft and 45th overall in the NFL draft in terms of overall hit rates. So feel pretty good about Troy Franklin's draft capital being pretty solid. Number one fundamental trait let's get into with Troy Franklin is his ability to create separation, his ability to run routes at a high level. Of course, most fundamental job of a wide receiver is to get open. Reception perception data has not dropped for Troy Franklin quite yet to this point, but I do feel like I already know what the results are going to look like. He was put on the vertical route tree plan, right? Run go routes, run fades, run in routes, run slants, run screens, run comebacks. He doesn't have a diverse route tree. It was very simplistic at the University of Oregon. That was also kind of a schematic thing that people have questions for Bo Nix about as well, is that, not all wide receivers, especially in this scheme, were tasked to run a full diverse route tree. And Troy Franklin specifically, I don't think he's capable of doing that quite yet because he's not an elite route runner. He's a good route runner. He can win specifically, man coverage. I think he's pretty strong in that area, but there are some simple concepts and some simple fundamentals that he's lacking at this point because he's a long, lean wide receiver, so he doesn't always sink his hips at the top of his routes. He doesn't always break physicality at the top of his route. He doesn't always, change up his releases at the press coverage point. He did primarily play on the outside. He barely played in the slot at all, so that's definitely a green flag. But he does have some route running nuances that need work. He is excellent down the field. I think his downfield route running was really, really spectacular, and he can create tremendous cushion versus man coverage at times. But like I said, the little nuances of playing wide receiver still elude him. He's a very young player. He could absolutely, develop that area. But against zone coverage, I noticed him drifting into defenders. I noticed his urgency at the top of his breaks, his wasted steps at the top of his breaks, his inability to sink his hips at the top of his breaks. He needs some refinement in that area. Again, the redeeming quality, he's 19 years old, 20 years old on the 2022 and 2023 tape that I watched. He's got so much that can be developed at the next level with the right coaching staff, and his profile has proven that he's capable of getting better with more experience, right? If he was a fifth-year senior who only had one good year, I would have a lot less confidence in his ability to get better as a route runner at the next level. But knowing that he's 21 years old entering the NFL with very little experience, and he already showed freshman to sophomore to junior year that he can progress as a player, I think the work ethic is there. I don't think he's a perfect route runner, but he does the hard stuff really well, and I think everything else should be coachable as an extremely young player. Number 2 fundamental trait, once you get open, you got to catch the football. And I talked about this with a number of other players so far in this Tail of the Tape series. Every player has a hinging trait, meaning they are either going to feast or famine based on this one singular trait in their profile. And to me, this is Troy Franklin's hinging trait. If he hits, it means that he cleaned up a lot of these qualms and areas of concern that I have for him as a hands catcher. If he misses, this is probably why, because Troy Franklin's hands in 2023 especially weren't just suspect. They were an outright liability. So when you look at Troy Franklin, I'm not just talking about drops, because he had a 10% drop rate, which was 5th worst in the class, and he led this class with 9 drops. Again, he gets a lot of targets, so obviously that's going to factor in, but a 10% drop rate was 5th worst in the class as well. So he needs to focus on the football better, track the ball better, and not drop the ball. That's one aspect of it. He also only secured 36.8% of his contested catches in 2023, and in his career, he only secured 37.8%. Right now, I'm in the process of building out our wide receiver prospect model, which should be done in the next couple days, next couple weeks at the very latest. And I can tell you right now, the benchmarks that you're looking for contested catches for guys that ended up having top 24 wide receiver seasons was career rate you wanted about 50% or better, and best season rate you wanted about 60 to 65%. Now, fortunately in 2022, he did actually go 7 of 11 on his contested catches for like a 63% rate. But this year, that long, slender frame that he has allowed DBs to work right through him. He was no real disruptor against contact. He was basically just knocked off his spot at the catch point. Against Washington, specifically in the Pac-12 championship, he had 3 passes broken up over the middle of the field on in-breaker. So he's cutting into the middle of the field. The DB is able to close that gap and break up the pass because Franklin didn't have the hands to squeeze that ball as well as the frame to be able to work through contact like that. So when you look at Troy Franklin, only 89.8% of his on-target passes, which was a lot of them because he had Bo Nix as his quarterback, who was very accurate, set the FBS record for completion percentage. So not a lot of receivers are going to have an advantage like that at quarterback in college. but only 89.8% of his on-target catches were caught, and that mark is below average in the class. And again, he should have been really good in that area given that Bo Nix was his quarterback. So to me, if he fails at the NFL level, it will be because he lacks the physicality to win at the catch point. This trait really reminds me of Jamison Williams, who was my comp or is my comp for Troy Franklin. Also reminds me a little bit of Jalen Hyatt as well. And for as much shit as Xavier Worthy gets on contested catches, at least Troy Franklin had an accurate quarterback to throw these balls where it needed to be. And Xavier Worthy did not have that luxury and still posted a better contested catch rate over his career than Troy Franklin. And he's also smaller than Franklin as well. So in my opinion, he's got to add 5 to 10 pounds of muscle to his frame because he's simply not strong enough at the catch point right now. And he does need more consistent hands because ball tracking was also a issue for him down the field. And that's definitely concerning knowing that he is a downfield weapon primarily. So a lot of issues with his hands, definitely his hinging trait. Like I said, if he can improve in those areas, he should be a great NFL player. But if not, I could see him going the way of, other downfield threats that end up not working out in the NFL. So yards after catch ability, obviously get open, catch the football, do something with it. Capable yards after the catch threat, in my opinion. He averaged 6.6 yards after catch per reception, which is a solid number. Primarily wins with speed, though. He doesn't really have the most elusive after the catch type of movements. He ran in the 4.4s, right? 4.41 at the 40, and he had a 55th percentile agility score. So he is a little bit more straight line and upright, kind of like a Will Fuller at the best case scenario there. However, he also had some really solid instincts as a ball carrier as well. So even though he's not the most elusive guy in the world, only 17.3% of his catches he forced a missed tackle, which was about a middle of the class mark in this year's wide receiver class. He's got something to build around. When he gets the ball in his hands, he knows where to go. He knows how to outrun people. He has the speed and the explosiveness to break angles. And like I said, that 4.41 40 sounds, good. Doesn't sound elite. I think he would have ran faster than that had he not had the flu at the combine. I think he probably would have ran in the mid 4.3s, if not potentially faster. And I know his 10-yard split time wasn't the greatest either. And I think that would have improved at the combine had he not been unhealthy, basically, and sick there. But Troy Franklin, regardless, adequate yards after catch, nothing special. Number 4 on this list is 3-level ability. And like I said, there is very little doubt for me that he can win down the field. He has the route running chops to do it. He has the speed. He has the explosiveness, the athleticism. It should be his primary role early on in his NFL career. The part of his 3-level ability that worries me, that I don't see yet, is his ability to win quickly in short to intermediate routes, as well as winning off the top of his routes in intermediate route running. So for me, he doesn't have the physicality, as I already talked about. I don't think he has the intelligence yet to win consistently over zone coverage and be able to make the correct reads. But you line him up in man coverage and tell him to win downfield, he's absolutely capable of doing that. So this is one of the film red flags that I think always perks my ears up, because I think it's possible that we're talking about the next Jalen Hyatt here. And his numbers look great in terms of 3-level efficiency. If you look at how good he was on short targets, 0 to 9 yards, he had like a 94 PFF receiving grade. But again, the Oregon scheme and Bo Nix is an accurate passer, and the way that Troy Franklin was kind of schemed up, it's doing him a lot of favors in the numbers, and it is kind of inflating his prospect profile a little bit. It's really difficult to discuss his potential here because you dissect the whole game and you realize there's warts to it. But again, I lean towards betting on the good with a young player who's been very productive, because even though there's volatility to what he is right now, some design touches, mostly downfield work, is all he's really capable of. I do think he can develop pretty quickly, knowing that he got better every year of his college career and he's still very young. So again, very, very polarizing prospect in my opinion. A lot of the big time NFL draft analysts don't actually have him ranked very high. I know Mel Kiper has him outside his top 10. Daniel Jeremiah has him ranked in like the mid 40s of his top 50. So we're not talking about a guy that the NFL draft community is quite as high on as the analytical dynasty bros of the fantasy community. So number 5 on this list, fundamental traits wise, is athleticism. Again, like I said, it sounded like he had the flu at the combine. He still put up an impressive RAS score, 9.02, 4.41, 40, an elite vertical jump, broad times, also pretty good, solid agilities as well. His athleticism is quite similar to what you see on film. Like I said, he's not the most sudden or jittery athlete in open space, but he is great straight line speed, great hops, good explosiveness. Also, again, reminds me a lot of Jalen Hyatt, at least as an athlete. Again, I think he's a better prospect than Jalen Hyatt, but not by a shit ton, to be honest. I think they're pretty similar in terms of their roles and their skill sets. Number 6 on this list is their production profile. I already alluded to it, but pure number guys who don't watch film are going to love Troy Franklin because his career yards per route run is 3rd in this class, only behind Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison. That's a pretty high number. Got better every single year of his college career. 14 touchdowns in 2023, which was tied for 2nd among all wide receivers in this class. 23.3 PPR points per game as well, which ranked 3rd of any wide receiver in this class's best season. So we're talking about a very productive fantasy receiver from a college standpoint, which correlates heavily to the NFL. 87.3 PFF receiving grade, was 4th in this class. 0.7 EPA per target, 3rd in this class. 34% target rate on man coverage routes in 2023, 4th in this class. He's an early declare. 19.6 breakout age. He's just 21 years old. Best season yards per route run of 3.32. I could go on and on with all the marks that he hits and all the good numbers that he has. His frame is a little wonky, which affects his analytics profile, but other than that, it's about as coveted as it gets. If you dropped this analytics profile on Xavier Legette, he would be a top 3 receiver in this class. That's basically how good the production profile is. So some of the subjective things that factored into my grade as well, like I said, lack of play strength, inability to finish through contact. I don't feel like he's the toughest, most dog mentality receiver that I've ever seen in my life. I also don't think he's the smartest, most instinctual receiver as a route runner either. Sometimes makes some mental mistakes and lacks understanding of zone coverage. I didn't think he was a very good run blocker either. He got, his base is pretty weak because he's only 176 pounds and he's tall and lean. So a lot of corners were able to get around him in the run game. But I feel like some of the positive subjective traits that he has is probably a very good work ethic given the steady projection and progression he saw over the 3 years at Oregon. But he also was unprepared for the combine, or maybe he was just sick and that's why he looked bad. But that perked my ears up a little bit as well. And the scheme and the quarterback play factored into my grade a little bit too, because I mentioned a lot of wide receivers would have loved to be in this position. Like if you dropped Adonai Mitchell in this Oregon offense this year, I'm sure he would have been as productive as Troy Franklin, if not more productive, because Adonai Mitchell had to deal with Quinn Ewers, the Texas offense, competing for targets with Xavier Worthy and Jatavian Sanders. So again, I think Franklin was in an ideal spot, definitely produced, definitely made the most of it. But I actually do think he could have even been better this year, given how good Bo Nix was as a passer, given how good the scheme was for Oregon wide receivers. So my final grade for Troy Franklin is 80 out of 100, and that's just on the fringe of a top 75 to top 50 talent in that range of prospects like Sky Moore, Quentin Johnston, Josh Downs, Jaden Reed, and De'Ami Brown. Those were the guys that were kind of between like 78 and 82 over the past couple draft classes, and that's kind of a hit or miss list, right? You got De'Ami Brown, QJ, guys that didn't really hit, Sky Moore as well, but Jaden Reed and Josh Downs have probably hit so far. So again, that's kind of how I feel about Troy Franklin. I think he's kind of hit or miss. He's currently my wide receiver 10 in this draft class, but if you're talking range of outcomes, he could have an argument to be as high as 5 or 6 because I think his ceiling is pretty high given how young he is. But at the same time, guys that I have ranked behind him, Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, their ranges of outcomes are a lot tighter, and I actually think at this moment today might be better receivers than Troy Franklin right now. But again, contributors year one is what we're looking for in Dynasty. And I'm not going to lie, I am really worried about Troy Franklin's inability to produce right away. I think he has a chance of being a face planner in year one, just given how much I feel like he needs to learn at the pro level. And again, landing spot draft capital is going to contribute to that. Like I said, my pro comparison for Troy Franklin is Jameson Williams. I think the differences in their profile are pretty well documented. Jameson Williams obviously had a torn ACL coming out of college, which definitely stunted his development in my opinion. But Franklin has a better analytics profile than Jameson Williams ever did, because JMO was at Ohio State for 2 years, had to transfer away to get away from Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and then he finally produces with a Heisman-winning quarterback in Bryce Young at Alabama. So again, I feel like he also was elevated by his scheme, by his quarterback play. Both guys have an issue winning through contact. That was my biggest issue with Jameson Williams coming out, was that his hands were a little bit suspect, contested catchability a little bit suspect. But I do think that Jameson Williams was a better route runner and a more dynamic athlete than Troy Franklin. So Again, a little bit of a hit or miss comp. To be honest, it's actually one of my favorites of the whole cycle. The positive way to look at a Jameson Williams comp for Troy Franklin is, hey, we got Jameson Williams all over again, basically, and he actually progressed each year of his college career instead of being a one-year wonder coming off of a torn ACL who played with a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. So again, I think I lean towards Troy Franklin having a better profile than Jameson Williams, but Jameson Williams' film was better than Troy Franklin's in my opinion. So again, even if he's a little bit better than J-Mo at the NFL level, we're talking about a guy that's probably a boomer bust flex play in terms of his median range of outcomes. But again, his ceiling is higher than that. That's why you maybe want to bet on Troy Franklin hitting his higher range of outcomes. So in terms of ideal landing spot where I'd love to see him go, I mean, easily the best landing spot for him is Kansas City. And I know we say that for every wide receiver, but specifically Kansas City needing a vertical number 2 wide receiver, Troy Franklin would be a perfect fit. I also think that the Carolina Panthers make sense as a landing spot because they already have short and intermediate targets already with Deontay Johnson, with Jonathan Mingo, guys like that. And I think Troy Franklin would be a good field stretcher to replace that DJ Chark role from last year. The Colts make sense schematically because, again, I think Josh Downs a good short target. Michael Pittman's your true number 1. Troy Franklin would be your field stretcher. But fantasy-wise, there's a lot of competition for targets there. And also, we expect it to probably be a run-heavy offense. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are the same thing. It's like you got 2 great wide receivers you're competing with, but I think Franklin would be a good fit as a number 3 for the Philadelphia Eagles right away. The Patriots make sense, but I worry he won't be ready to be a number 1 immediately. And I think my favorite, like, non-obvious landing spot, no Buffalo, no Kansas City, is the Steelers, because I think the Russell Wilson factor of being able to stretch the field, working across from a number 1 receiver like George Pickens, would actually make quite a bit of sense for Troy Franklin. So again, currently, like I said, Troy Franklin is my wide receiver 10 among rookie wide receivers. He's my wide receiver 45 in Dynasty overall, including veterans. Rookie draft wise, this is a guy that I really don't want to spend a first rounder on. I think that this is someone that I need to get in round 2 of a Dynasty rookie draft in Superflex formats. And to be honest, if he goes to a really good landing spot like Kansas City, I think he'll get really elevated off the board and up the board, and I'll probably be out on him at that point. But I want to get some shares because even though I prefer Xavier Worthy and Ladd McConkey and the upside even of an Adonai Mitchell or an Xavier Legette, I feel that Troy Franklin's a prospect profile that I want to have a couple shares of, and him and Keon Coleman both are guys that are very polarizing to me, but I do want to get my shares here and there. And I know some analysts will tell you, oh, just look at the numbers. I'll bet on this profile 10 out of 10 times. It's correct process, but you would have said that about Terrace Marshall. You would have said that about Rondell Moore, about Quentin Johnston, about Laviska Shenault, about Jalen Reagor, about N'Keal Harry, about Corey Coleman. All of those guys had film concerns, not analytics concerns. All of those guys were really good on paper and not that good on film. So the numbers tell part of the story. The film tells the other part, and to me, this is setting up as an analytics darling who gets elevated because of his production, but when you watch the film, you contextualize why he was so productive and what he actually needs to do at the next level, and it makes me concerned. So with Troy Franklin, 203 to 205 in your rookie draft, absolutely take the shot at that point, but to me, this is the range where I'm going to start splitting off of wide receivers and pivoting towards the running back class, Trey Benson, those type of guys, whoever gets good draft capital and good landing spots. If I'm on the board at 202 and my best available wide receiver is Pittsburgh Steelers Troy Franklin or Indianapolis Colts Troy Franklin, and I got Trey Benson with 2nd or 3rd round draft capital to the Raiders or the Cowboys or something, I'm definitely going to be going with the running back and pivoting away from wide receivers at that point in the draft. So again, film is really important with Troy Franklin. If you want the full film breakdown, me and Danny broke them down on our site, Flock Fantasy. You can head on over there and use the promo code FSE when you sign up for a 7-day free trial, 30% off any of our subscriptions, and 6 months for free when you sign up annually. And if you want to, all of our film breakdowns are already on there. So if you want to see and just binge in that 7-day free trial, Troy Franklin, Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, all these guys, they're all up there right now. We will have Xavier Legette. We will have Keon Coleman among the wide receivers. We will have some running backs coming out. Hopefully we get to some quarterbacks and Brock Bowers as well. Definitely we should have at least 10 to 15 film breakdowns by the time the NFL draft comes. So if you're interested in that, check it out down below in the link in the pinned comment to flockfantasy.com. Check it out in the link in the description. If you're a Dynasty player, we have everything you need. You can import your teams, see everything that you have on your roster, everything that your league mates have. You can use our trade calculator. You can use our rankings. Our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide is up, top 50 prospects. You can see my entire write-up on Troy Franklin and the rest of the wide receiver classes. So definitely check all that stuff out if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.